Let's talk about leases. If my landlord and I get along well, do I even need a written lease?
Well, legally speaking, you can have a verbal lease, but it's always best to have a written lease. It's just in case there are any disputes later.
What kind of things can I expect to see on a lease?
Now, all leases are different, but here are some of the things you should look for in a lease. The amount of rent and when and how often it is due, usually monthly. The amount of the security deposit, how long the lease lasts, the amount of any late fee and when it will be assessed, whether the lease is automatically renewed after it expires, how many people, including children, can live in the apartment, the name and address of the landlord and property manager, if there is one, the terms and conditions of the lease, such as pets, smoking, etc., and any related apartment rules, whether the apartment can be subleased, and who is going to pay for what utilities. So, maybe the landlord will pay for some of the utilities and maybe the tenant will pay for others.
Is there anything that cannot be included in the lease?
The lease cannot include any illegal terms or conditions, such as a waiver of the renter's legal rights, an agreement by the renter not to contest the lease in court, a requirement that the renter make permanent improvements to the property, any limitations on the landlord's financial liability, a requirement that the renter pay the landlord's attorney's fees, or any agreement that the landlord can keep the renter's personal property if the rent is unpaid.
Are there any meaningful differences between apartments and mobile homes?
With mobile homes, maybe you own the mobile home and are renting the space in which the mobile home sits, or maybe you're renting both from different landlords. If you own the mobile home, though, and do not pay the space rent, the mobile home itself could be evicted, meaning that you would have to move it somewhere else. Sometimes this can be difficult or even impossible to do.
You mentioned subleasing earlier. What is subleasing, and when can I sublease my apartment?
A sublease is when you have someone else live in your apartment, even though the apartment is still in your name, and your name is still in the lease. You cannot sublease your apartment without written consent from the landlord, either in the lease or in another document. However, the landlord can only reject a proposed sublease for a limited number of reasons, such as insufficient financial ability of the proposed new renter to pay for rent, the unwillingness of the proposed new renter to agree to apartment rules, including having too many people for the apartment or wanting to have pets that aren't allowed, or if the proposed new renter gets a bad reference from a previous landlord.
What if the landlord refuses to give consent to a proposed sublease?
Once a proposed new renter has provided a signed offer to sublease the apartment, the landlord has 2 weeks to respond. If the landlord rejects the sublease, he or she must provide the existing tenant with a written explanation of why. If the reasons for rejection are not legally valid, then the law allows the existing tenant to go on ahead and sublease the apartment, though I'd be careful about this. I should also add that these same rules apply if you're looking to move out of the apartment permanently and want someone else to take on the remaining months of your lease.